Hi, I am Matt Cardiff, and I am here on behalf of Operation Lifesaver today. I actually am a volunteer. Everyone who does these presentations is on a volunteer basis. I am currently employed by the California Public Utilities Commission as a rail safety inspector. I worked for about 17 years for Union Pacific and Southern Pacific Railroad, so I have a lot of exposure to railroad issues, and the main focus of Operation Lifesaver is safety. We're here in the interest of safety, and it's important to know that there's issues that happen every day. You guys are all professional drivers, and I'm sure you see things that are unsafe and potentially hazardous every single day you're out there. It certainly happens on the railroad. I get notifications about incidents that occur, you know, people that get hit at crossings, whether they're on foot or in cars or what have you. All right, we have the 3 E's of Operation Lifesaver. Operation Lifesaver likes to have slogans for you guys, make it easy to remember. We have education, engineering, and enforcement. 3 things that are all very important. Education has to do with, you know, getting word out to the public, letting them know that these conditions exist, that there are hazards all the time. Obviously, presentations like this are part of the education process, but Operation Lifesaver coordinates with news media and things like that to get the word out. Engineering is something that you know, involves making crossings safer by adding protective devices and things like that. You guys are all a part of that if you choose to be. You guys are professional drivers. You're out there, you see the issues, you see unsafe crossings, you see places where there are issues. And you need to let your dispatcher know or let your supervisor know, and you know, through coordinated efforts, oftentimes we can make meaningful changes for safety here. So you guys are all part of that engineering. Enforcement, something you guys can be involved in too. If you see unsafe crossings, if you see kids going to school, crossing over tracks unsafely, report it. You guys need to be involved. I mean, everybody needs to take safety personally, and the more you share that information, the more people can do things about it. Operation Lifesaver works in coordinated efforts to get local law enforcement agencies out at problem crossings. They do it once or twice a month, and they'll have a big cooperative effort with different agencies, sheriffs, highway patrol, railroad police, and so forth, and they'll get them all involved, and they will watch motorists who try to beat trains or try to beat crossing arms or who try to go before crossing arms get back into a safe position. The 3 E's all have real major importance, and you guys, like I said, if you choose to be, you can all be safety advocates and be involved in this. This is one of the ones I like. It's a real simple slide, and basically, you guys, the message of Operation Lifesaver is really simple. It's, you know, what I really want to do is raise your awareness and raise your consciousness about you know, safety at highway rail grade crossings. Okay, that's really where our focus is. That's where most of the incidents occur, and as professional drivers, that's where you guys are going to see most of the problems also. Any time is train time. Freight trains often don't run on a schedule. Even commuter trains that do have schedules, pretty tight schedules, often get behind schedule for various reasons, you know. Okay, so here we have a freight train coming along, and it's, you know, it's a pretty self-explanatory picture. You know, most of these are almost self-explanatory. And most of these issues, most of these safety issues, if you or anybody in the general public ever really stop to think about it, they are self-evident. But a lot of times we don't stop to think about it. So here comes the freight train. Freight trains, hard to stop and run unpredictably. They do have schedules, and having worked for a freight railroad for 17 plus years, I can tell you lots and lots of times they don't run on time. And the other thing is they run 24 hours a day. They probably run the bulk of their traffic at night. You guys need to have awareness of the fact that any time is train time. You guys, as you go on your appointed rounds, as you run your routes, you may find that the traffic requirements change. You know, as professional drivers, I think you guys should all be empowered to talk to your dispatchers as much as possible when you have these issues. If you're getting caught at crossings and it's slowing you down, making it hard to run your route, if issues like that come up, make them aware of it. Oftentimes there is a reroute available. There's something that can be done to help you guys. "10 minutes is basically how long they're allowed to block it if they're stopped. They are engaged in switching operations. They can go, as long as they're moving, they can go back and forth pretty much all day long. But the answer to your question, 10 minutes if they're not engaged in switching operations. What, last year Union Pacific ran a train that was over 3 miles long. That was a freight train. It was humongous, and it was an experimental run. Most of the time you're not going to see a train much over 1.5 miles. But 1.5 miles is long for a freight train, and freight trains don't move with the speed of a commuter train. Yeah, when you're waiting, it's a long time. I mean, if that freight train is moving at 60 miles an hour, it only takes 1.5 minutes to clear, right? If it's 1.5 miles long. But if it's going less than 60 miles an hour, which it often is in urban areas, it will just seems like forever. Yeah, oh yeah, you'll see 2 mile long trains. And as the Alameda Corridor continues to increase their volume, we're gonna see more and more of it. So in terms of being empowered, and you guys as professional drivers, be aware of what's going on. If an issue is recurring for you, that should be a sign that you really need to talk to somebody about a better way. And finding a better way oftentimes is the key to operating safely, instead of being in a hurry or trying to rush and beat a train because you're going to be stuck for a while. Okay, here's another one. Like I said, self-evident. This is the view from inside the locomotive cab. That's where the engineer will sit. And, well, we like to ask the question, what's missing from this control set is present in yours? You guys have something that they don't have, right? Yeah, very good. In the back, steering wheel. Yes, there's no steering wheel. Trains cannot swerve. They are on a set of tracks, and they go forwards and they go backwards, and that's all they can do. And so, like I said, it's self-evident, but we see these situations a lot of times, particularly where there's multiple tracks at a signal, highway, rail, grade crossing, and there's a signal, and maybe there's tracks going through there, and guys will park right on the tracks. And they'll figure, well, gee whiz, I was here first. I'm here first. The train will stop if a train comes because I was here first. But trains can't swerve, and they also oftentimes can't stop. The stopping distance, okay, there's the one I like. We're looking at a bus, 230 feet at 55 miles per hour, right? And how long does it take a train? This is a freight train here on the bottom. They're figuring about a 10,000 ton train at 55 miles per hour. That's an awful lot of mass, and it takes it at least a mile. That's not exactly a mile, that's at least a mile. If track conditions are wet, or if the train is moving on a downhill grade, it's going to take more than a mile. So you've got to figure, even if he can see it from a mile away, he may not be able to stop. Let me see, can I go back? Yes. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so this poor guy sitting here, he might have thought he'd be okay. There's nobody in there, so I'm assuming that he just jumped out because he was stalled. But anyway, the point is, the guy in the cab cannot stop for you. One of our guys used to be an engineer, and he told a story of seeing a guy out in Ontario, and he was coming right towards, it was a panel truck, got stalled on the tracks. And as he's approaching the tracks, he made an emergency brake application, and he sounded his horn, sounded the bell and whistle, everything's going, and he's doing everything he can to stop and to warn the guy to get out of the way. And of course he ended up hitting the guy. He couldn't stop in time. And just prior to that, he had poured himself a little cup of coffee and set it up here on his control stand. And after the impact, he stopped after a quarter of a mile or so, and the truck was totaled. And then he reached over there and noticed that he hadn't spilled even a drop of coffee, picked his little cup up and took a drink. So the impact to the vehicle is tremendous, and what happens inside the locomotive cab, oftentimes, it's a little jarring, but no more than that. The damage that is done, we have an indication of the ratio. I mean, just a standard vehicle going over a soda can, it's about the same weight differential as it is from a train to a car. So to you, or to the engineer, your car looks like a soda can. And you guys are driving buses. Well, this is a semi here that went up against a freight train. And you can see the train is still on the tracks, but the truck's in bad shape. So it's never a good idea to put yourself at any kind of a risk. I mean, even if it's however slight, don't take a chance, follow the rules, and do what you're supposed to do. When you come to these active warning devices, they tell you what to do. They'll tell you if you need to stop. The active warning devices are the ones that are going to do something. You're going to see lights flashing. You're going to see arms going up and down, things like that. They actually do something. And there's good information here. My favorite one is right here, this one on the end. It starts with a crossbuck. All crossings have a crossbuck. That is the one thing that is federally mandated. Every crossing must have a crossbuck to warn you. Everything else is extra, and oftentimes added in the interest of safety, to make the public more aware of what kind of situations exist here. This one's often ignored. It says 2 tracks. We have, in this situation, there are 2 sets of tracks here. It's a critical situation. There was a kid killed a couple weeks ago in Riverside in a situation where there was 2 sets of tracks. They waited for one train to clear, didn't know there was another one coming on the other tracks. And they went too soon. They didn't wait for the all clear. They just started walking because they knew the train had gone by. Anyways, this is vital information. And there's a place down in LA I know where there's 9 tracks. You got to make it safely across 9 tracks. That's a long ways to go, you know, and every time I find myself down there, I'm looking both ways, back and forth, you know, like I'm watching a ping pong match. Okay, so crossbucks, lights, and of course the crossing arm. One of my favorites. Crossing arm comes down when the train's coming, and when the train clears, it goes back up. And anybody here know when it's actually safe to go? Yes.
Your light stop.
Yes. Thank you. That's what I get in a professional driver group. People know the answer to that question. The general public really doesn't. When the arm starts to go up, they think it's all clear, let's go. And it's not until that light goes out, which is usually when it's in the fully upright position, that it's now okay to go. I just had an argument with my wife about this the other day. She said, well, that's just stupid. You know, when the arm starts to go, that's when, you know, we should all go. Well, maybe they should change it, but for now, that's the way the law reads. Okay, here are some passive signs. There's pavement markings. We have an advance warning sign and the famous crossbuck. This doesn't look like a route that most of you guys are probably taking. It looks pretty rural to me, and you know, but that's why they probably don't have crossing arms here, because you know there's nothing much else going on here except the train itself. But I will point out to you that there's very poor visibility here. As you approach the crossing, it's pretty well concealed. So, you know, situational awareness is something that we talk about in safety a lot. Being aware of conditions, changing conditions around you. This is one where you certainly are not going to see that train coming until it's right there, or until you're right there at the crossing. No, I would say it's not always going slow. It depends on, you know, on the speed limits, and the train itself sometimes has certain limitations on it if they're carrying certain types of loads, hazardous materials. Sometimes they have a speed restriction placed on them, but not necessarily. And, you know, I don't know where this was taken. Well, it's not required, and evidently the community here has probably, you know, determined that it's not necessary. And that's really what everybody needs to do. If you see situations that you think represent hazards, talk to people about it. And, you know, sometimes between, you know, your local politicians, between the railroads don't want accidents either. They don't like them. They cost a lot of money, and they, you know, it's bad publicity. So there's nothing good that happens in them. Okay, and here we go. Oh, look, there's nice. We've got a couple of buses in our pictures today. This is a school bus, of course, and this is a situation where, you know, this bus is required to stop and open his door and listen as well as look. Coming up on the picture that we just saw, you can see where, you know, listening. Our motto here at Operation Lifesaver is look, listen, and live. Okay, that's. And that's good advice whether you're in a car or whether you're on the ground. Use everything you've got. Don't just take a quick look and think that's good enough. The guy approaching this, you can see trees here, trees here. I mean, I don't know what's on the other side here, because presumably the train's going to come in either direction. Remember, I told you trains run at any time. They also go in either direction. Whichever way the tracks go, trains can go. Don't pass, shift, or stop. 3 things you should not do when you're coming over a railroad crossing. Highway, rail grade crossings. For professional drivers, it's almost insulting to you guys to tell you not to do these things, I'm sure, but passing it at a place like this, anytime you're doing anything out of the ordinary, you're adding one more factor that could contribute to an accident, a potential incident. Stopping on the tracks, this guy's clearly, you know, in a bad position. It's the kind of thing I've already talked about, but this guy here, he's in a bad position too. The train is not just exactly as big as these tracks. One of those things that if you think about it, we all know it. The wheels sit here and the body of the cars are all wider than that. But this guy here has just put any of his passengers at risk. So as you guys approach these things, you should all know this, but make sure that you have room to come all the way through and clear front and back, not just the front and back. So you've got to give yourselves plenty of room. This guy has no way out, really, with this nice guy crowding him from behind. He doesn't have anywhere to go. He's going to have to create an accident to avoid an accident if a train comes. Okay, another issue. Another issue, probably not as much for the types of vehicles you guys operate, but you know, there are laws against this kind of thing too. You've got to make sure that your vehicle, you know the vehicle that you're operating, right? And you make sure that it's going to clear. You don't take any chances on something like this happening. All right, I love this slide. This slide, you know, we have the representation of a train coming towards the vehicle here. And the question for the slide is, what do you do if you're stalled on the tracks? If you do stall on the tracks, what do you do?
You get out.
Great, you get out, and as professionals, you guys also know you got to make sure all your passengers get out too, right? And if you have anybody who's disabled in any way, I mean small children or elderly or people who just have handicaps, you need to make sure they all have access to get out. And now the train's coming at you, and the answer, of course, is contained in our slide, but where do you go? What safe place do you go? You've got to find a place to safely await the impact. And to me, the intuitive answer is, you know, if something's chasing you, you run away from it. In the case of a train coming at you, you've got to move towards the train, but away from the tracks. Just like we see here. This guy is moving, you know, 45-degree angle, but basically you're going towards the train, but away from the tracks, right? And anybody want to tell me why?
Because the impact is going.
Yes, yes, flying debris is going to come out and hit you, and people have been killed by flying debris because they moved away from, you know, they followed their intuition. In a moment of panic, you don't have time to rationally think through this. You just see it coming, and, you know, normally you would run. It's probably ingrained in our genes somewhere from, you know, the days when cavemen were running from saber-toothed tigers. You know, they'd see the tiger coming and they'd run away. Moving towards the tiger would not be advisable. Train's coming towards you, move away from the tracks, and you guys you know, will want to probably give them a gathering point and direct people to a nearby safe shelter, whatever's nearby, but get them out of harm's way. Okay, when you come to a crossing, there are emergency notification systems represented. You'll see the signal box down here in the corner, and pretty much every crossing you'll find a signal box which controls if they have crossing arms and things like that. If it's not a merely passive set of signs, you'll see a signal box. But even on the crossbuck, it's required to have the emergency notification system. There's a phone number to call to report stalled vehicle on tracks or other emergencies. Call this number, and it should also have the crossing number. That's a Department of Transportation federal crossing number, so it should be there available to you guys. And I would imagine the first thing you would probably do is call dispatch and let them know. And then I'm not sure how your system is set up, but if you call dispatch, they could probably relay that same information for you, so you don't have to worry about how many calls you got to make while you're stalled on the tracks or whatever. The crossbuck, remember, is the one thing that's always required, so it should be there on the crossbuck, on the same stand that holds the crossbuck, whether it's an active or a passive type of crossbuck. Oh yeah, you'll see malfunctioning crossing arms, absolutely, and that's a time when it needs to be reported.
Right.
It's not, that crossing number is, you know, the phone number for emergency contact. The emergency contact number is not just for stalled vehicles. I mean, if you see a crossing arm malfunctioning, yeah, you want to call that in too and let them know, hey, we got a problem here. Okay, I wanted to include something here. This is standing too close. Operation Lifesaver includes a whole section. I can expand on it as much as anybody ever wants to hear about trespassing issues. But standing too close is a trespassing issue. I like this slide. I thought it might be applicable to you professional drivers because you deal with pedestrians, you deal with kids, you see people. And what I like to point out is, you know, I mean, it tells us they're standing too close. You can see where the signal is and the crossing arm. And if it's not safe for a vehicle to be that close, how could it possibly be safe for kids to be this close? There is a 3-foot overhang minimum, as I pointed out, a 3-foot overhang minimum. Also, there are many cars, and anyone here who has road experience will know, they're called high wides or extra dimensional loads, which are much more than 3 feet wide. And so they have to have special clearances in the state of California to run those types of cars. But if you're standing next to the tracks, you're not safe. And there's also shifted loads. You know, you might see a big load of pipe or lumber going down where there'll be a pipe hanging to one side or lumber hanging off. So things can come off the side of the box cars and get you. You definitely need to stand back. I should have mentioned this back on the section with the passive signs, but when you see those passive signs, if it's not marked, there's supposed to be a marker on the road where you stop, but you've got to be no closer than 15 feet from those tracks, no further away than 50 feet when you make your stop. Okay? Conventional wisdom on the railroad is that there are no small accidents. There's nothing that just requires a Band-Aid. You know, they're all big. You're dealing with large, heavy equipment, and if anybody gets hurt, it's usually going to be a pretty serious injury. So that pretty well concludes Operation Lifesaver presentation. I have a video for you.
As a motor coach or transit bus driver, you log thousands of hours and thousands of kilometers or miles at the wheel every year. Motor coach tours can cross international borders, so you must be aware of local laws and signs that alert you to potential hazards. Transit bus operators have a tough schedule to keep, usually in a busy urban environment. It's a demanding job requiring all your skills as a driver. On any given day, the lives of hundreds of people are your responsibility. Your passengers and their families are depending on you to keep them safe and get them to their destination on time, in spite of traffic or weather conditions. You must be aware of all the potentially dangerous situations that might arise. One situation that can have the most tragic consequences is a collision between a bus and a train. It's a confrontation that you and your passengers are guaranteed to lose. At the same time, these incidents are completely preventable if you follow the basic rules outlined in this presentation. Operation Lifesaver Canada and Operation Lifesaver Incorporated, working in collaboration to save lives, present The Bus Stops Here, Highway Rail Safety for Motor Coach and Transit Drivers. This is an educational program that will give you the information you need to avoid highway rail crossing incidents. Because this video is intended for use in Canada and the United States, we will use both metric and US units of measurement. We will also use working terms from both countries. They will mean the same thing in each example. First of all, be aware of the following warning signs placed near a highway railway crossing. Usually the first sign you will see will be a diamond-shaped or a round yellow warning sign. There might also be pavement markings painted on the road surface. Both indicate the same thing: prepare to stop, look, and listen. Two-lane roads may be posted with a no passing sign. As you approach the tracks, you will notice another important sign: the crossbuck. Every public highway railway crossing is marked by crossbucks on both sides of the tracks. Some of them have gates, lights, and bells. Most of them just have crossbucks. In urban areas, there is another kind of crossing when a light rail or trolley car track runs down a street and crosses another street. You won't see a crossbuck at these crossings if the train movements are controlled through the red, yellow, and green traffic lights. Any way you see it, it means the same thing. A train may be approaching, so be prepared to stop and yield to an oncoming train. If there is more than one set of tracks, the sign below the crossbuck will tell you the number of tracks you will be going over. Remember, a train could be coming from either direction on either track. There is one other sign that you may encounter. This warning sign with the word exempt means that by law, you do not have to come to a full stop at the railroad grade crossing. You must be aware of state, provincial, or federal laws or company policy. They may require you as a motor coach or transit bus driver to come to a full stop at highway railway crossings whether there is a stop sign or not. So here's the suggested procedure to follow when you reach the crossing. When approaching the crossing, activate your four-way flashers as you begin to slow down to warn other motorists that you're stopping. If you're on a multiple lane highway, don't make the stop in the center or left-hand lanes. Stay in the right lane. Look for a stop line. If there is no stop line, you must stop no closer than 15 feet or 5 meters from the closest rail. Whenever possible, open your door and window and listen for a train. Engineers may sound the train's horn as they approach a crossing. Some companies may have procedures against opening doors close to the tracks. Follow your company procedures. The driver may be instructed by company policy to perform additional established control or steps while stopped at a highway railway crossing. Be sure to look both ways, as a train could be coming from either direction. When you are sure that the tracks are clear, then you can proceed. If you are at a crossing with multiple tracks, use extra caution. Do not proceed until the lights and bell have stopped, the train has passed, or until you can do it safely. If there is more than one track, make sure all the tracks are clear before crossing. Remember, trains could be coming from either direction. If your company policy allows you to pick up or drop off passengers between scheduled stops, remember the rule: never stop closer than 5 meters or 15 feet from the nearest rail. If the signal lights, bells, or gates are operating as you approach the crossing, you must stop. Do not try to go around the gates. A train is close. You and your passengers may not survive the consequences if you're hit. If you are caught and convicted of running the warning signals, you could face harsh legal penalties and you may lose your license and your job. This footage graphically demonstrates the massive impact that a train has when colliding with a bus. Most people on this bus would have been at least severely injured. Passengers sitting in the area of impact would likely have been killed along with the driver. There are many types of buses on the road. If your job requires you to drive a variety of different vehicles, it is very important that you are aware of the vehicle characteristics on each and every trip. Lengths will vary, so it's important to know your bus. It is information that you need to know when approaching a crossing. Some drivers may even drive 2 different types of buses in a day, so we can't stress enough, know your bus. Here's a scenario that will explain why. A signal light or stop sign is backing up traffic on the other side of the tracks, and you can't tell if you have enough room to get across without at least part of your bus being on the track. Don't get caught. Always look ahead. Make sure there's enough space for your bus if you have to stop, and be sure to factor in enough space for the overhang from both your bus and the train. Don't get caught on the tracks. If it won't fit, don't commit. If you are driving a standard transmission, it is illegal to shift while going over the tracks in case you stall the bus. Penalties for not obeying the law include stiff monetary fines, demerit points on your license, or both. In addition to knowing the details of your vehicle, you should also know your route. Study where the rail crossings are located so that you can anticipate your need to stop. This will also help you avoid being surprised by a crossing when driving at night or in bad weather. It is possible for a bus to drive into the side of a moving train at a railroad grade crossing. This can happen at night or during snowstorms, fog, or heavy rain. Just one more reason why you should know your route before you start out. It is easy to misjudge a train's speed and distance from the crossing. Because of the train size and your perspective as it comes toward you, it appears to be moving much more slowly than it actually is. Whether you drive highway or an urban transit route, you are responsible for keeping to the schedule. Just remember that highway railway crossings are no place to try to make up time if you're running behind. Safety first, schedule second. As we mentioned earlier, light rail or trolley cars may not have crosswalks to identify a rail crossing. They will have other warning and information signs. If the crossing is controlled by the red, yellow, and green traffic lights, you may not be required to make your standard safety stop. Know your routes and the local regulations. When in doubt, make your safety stop. It is the safest thing to do. Here is what to do if your bus stalls or is disabled on a crossing. You must evacuate your passengers immediately, even if the warning bell and gates are not operating. Look around and quickly decide on a spot where everyone is to meet once they are off the bus. Follow any established company evacuation procedures. Take charge, speak loudly, and clearly indicate where you want the passengers to assemble away from the bus. Remember, in a collision, the train will probably push the bus down the tracks. You should have the passengers walk in the direction the train is approaching, but at a 45-degree angle to avoid being hit by debris. Pick a meeting spot at least 50 meters or 150 feet from the bus. Otherwise, meet at an accessible spot the proper distance away from the track. Keep everyone calm. Ask able-bodied passengers to assist others who need help getting off the bus. Railway-grade crossings in Canada and the United States have an emergency 1-800 number posted either on the back of the crossbuck, a pole, or a nearby equipment shed. Call the number immediately and tell the operator your situation. Give the crossing identification number or mileage point that will also be posted on the sign. If there is no emergency number posted, call 911 or your local emergency number and report your location and situation. Remember to call your dispatch or control center and tell them what is going on according to your procedures. Don't use the radio on the bus. You may drive the biggest bus on the road with a long stopping distance. But remember, regardless of how long it takes you to stop your vehicle, it's nothing compared to how long it takes to stop a train. An average train running 100 kilometers or 60 miles per hour can take up to 2 kilometers or over a mile to stop in an emergency situation. As a rule, by the time the train crew sees anything blocking the crossing, it's too late to stop short of the obstruction. And forget about trying to run down the tracks to flag down a train. It will never be able to stop in time before it gets to the crossing. As a professional driver, you are responsible for making choices that will prevent incidents, protect lives, and prevent damage to vehicles and property. Here are the key points to remember about highway rail crossing safety. Know your bus, know your route, know the dangers, and never take any chances. Most of all, remember, any time is train time. Always expect a train at a crossing from either direction. If you follow these guidelines, you know all train and bus incidents will be preventable. National, provincial, state, or local laws and regulations governing bus driver actions at highway or railway crossings may vary. Please check policies in the areas that you work to be sure that you are in compliance at all times.
I saw in the video an incident where the crossing arm was coming down on top of I think it was a bus. Yeah, what do you do when that happens? If you're there and it starts to come down on you, the recommendation is to drive right through it. Those things are all kind of breakaway arms. The railroad has a warehouse full of them. Move right on through and get in the clear as fast as you can. Get out of the way and get to safety. Title 49, that is from the Code of Federal Regulations. This is federal stuff, Transportation, Chapter 3. This is just where this is coming from. Part 383 talks about the commercial driver's license, standards, requirements, and penalties. And Subpart D, drivers, disqualifications, and penalties. Okay, and here's some of the penalties that we wanted to talk about. Your first violation, disqualified for at least 60 days. One violation and you're 2 months out of work. That's brutal. I'd be out of house and home in that amount of time myself. Second violation, disqualified for at least 120 days during any 3-year period for separate incidents. So the time clock runs for 3 years on that. Your third violation is going to disqualify you for at least 1 year during any 3-year period for separate incidents. And then special penalty to your employer. This won't affect you guys directly, but any employer who knowingly allows a disqualified driver to operate a commercial vehicle is subject to a fine not more than $11,000. So if you've been disqualified and you're allowed to drive, they're taking a big risk also. So just stuff to be aware of. We're into the CDL disqualification. Commercial driver's license convicted of any of these 6 offenses at a crossing must be disqualified. You know, you guys may be familiar with this stuff, but just in case you're not, I'm going to go through them. Not required to stop, but fail to slow and check for the train. Not everybody is required to stop, but some are. But if you fail to slow and check for a train, that's a violation that requires disqualification. Okay? All 6 of these are. Not required to stop, but fail to stop for a train. Well, that's one you can't hide. If you don't stop for a train, everybody's going to know about that one, right? Required to stop, but fail to stop at crossing. Insufficient space to drive over crossing without stopping. That was like the high-centered vehicle that we saw. Failure to obey traffic control device or enforcement official at a crossing, and failure to clear the crossing because of undercarriage clearance. Oh, that's actually the one. Okay, so go back to number 4, insufficient space to drive over the crossing without stopping. Yeah, that was the school bus who left his rear end out to foul. So you've got to make sure those are actually violations which require your disqualification if you happen to get caught doing it. So all things to be well aware of, all things we've talked about here. All right, that's really all I have for today, and I want to thank you for having me here. Enjoyed being here. All right.